Hi, my name is Tom Anglin. I just want to say thanks for stopping by. I want to share with you briefly um, just what Jesus did in my life. I was raised in church. I was born into a very godly home of praying people, praying ancestors. I mean, I was surrounded on both sides of my family with praying ancestors and was very blessed to be in the home that I was in. I was raised right, but my dad's occupation meant that we moved a lot. We traveled. The job would be over and we were on to the next thing. Some years I was in 2 or 3 schools in the same grade year. So meeting the Lord as a little boy, knowing the reality of Jesus, but as we begin to go here and go there, I was always the new kid. I always felt like I had something to prove, and just began to fall further and further away from Jesus until finally, in my early teens, I began to experiment with drugs. I began to run with a bad crowd and begin to just have a sense as I got older that I had fallen so far from where I'd been. And though I was raised in a church that taught once in grace, always in grace, I never believed it. I never believed that a person as wicked as I was, no matter what I had said to God when I was a little boy, what I felt as a little boy, would keep me from going to hell. I believed in heaven and I believed in hell. And so through the constant moving and being with the party crowds here and there, I went into darker and darker places, and just that feeling of doom and lostness was overtaking me. And so my only enjoyment was being high. And so I had a dream one night that Satan appeared to me by my bedside, and he was in a long black robe with a hood over his head and eyes that looked like burning rubies. And I was petrified by his fierceness. And I got out of the bed and I got on my knees and I said, "Please don't kill me. I'll do anything you say." And he looked at me and then he turned around and walked away. And I woke up and I realized it was a bad dream, but I felt like I had surrendered my soul to the devil. And then I believed there's no way that I can be forgiven. I've committed the unpardonable sin. I believed that. I'd heard that, heard the teaching about that, and I believed I had done that. And so my only enjoyment in life was getting high, and I loved music. I was a leader in a hard rock band, and we would go to every concert we could go to. And one night, 3 of my friends and I went to see Black Sabbath. And we only had one joint between us, and we smoked that joint, and none of us got high. It was just not, it wasn't any good. And so I wasn't high, and what I'm about to tell you was not a hallucination. So I was up against the security wall. I could reach out across that pathway and put my hand on the stage. I was right up in front. That's where I wanted to be. And during the course of the concert, this first band, Manfred Mann's Earth Band, and they were like a one-hit wonder band. They were playing music so loud that it was making me sick. And I thought, for the first time in my life, I wish somebody would turn this down. And I remember feeling so hot, I felt like I was on fire. I felt like I was going to melt and run down in the floor. And I asked my friends, I said, "Why is it so hot in here?" And they said, "Are you sick? It's not hot in here." And about that time, I slid down that security wall. And when I hit the floor with a thud, the floor opened up and I started down face first down this tunnel that was like a rough rock tunnel. And there were story after story of prison cells. And the captives were screaming at me, go back, don't come here." And I've got a gag in my mouth, and I've got my hands and feet chained behind me, falling face first. The farther that I fell, the hotter I became. And I thought, I'm going to melt before I hit the floor. And then I saw a ring of fire and these huge, hideous creatures with fangs longer than my fingers. Not fangs, but with talons longer than my fingers. And they had fangs, and they were screaming, "We have him now. We have him now." And I thought, well, this is it. This is what the preacher and my parents warned me about, that I didn't want to go the way of the world. I wanted to follow Jesus, and I didn't follow Jesus. I fell away from Jesus, and I thought, I am doomed forever. I can't even explain to you how horrible that feeling was. And about the time the tallest one that was screaming, "We have him now," was about to grab me, I was knocked back into conscience. One of my friends was just slapping my head. I could hear the crack as they were in a panic. They were horrified. They thought I was dead. They said I was cold. And so everybody was just the band almost stopped playing. Everybody's just kind of looking at me, and it really embarrassed me. And I just jerked away, and I leaned up against the wall, and I'd only been standing there a minute or so, and I slid back down the wall, and the same identical instant replay of falling into hell happened to me again, just the way it did before. And I thought, well, I got out of there once, but I'm going down this time. And right when they were about to grab me again, my friends they were frantic, and they were screaming at me, and people were shaking me, and snap out of it, snap out of it. And I finally came around. I opened my eyes. I couldn't talk. I couldn't walk. I was paralyzed. And two of my friends got under my arms, and I remember my feet dragging behind me as they drug me. Everybody cleared out of the way, got to the sideline of that Coliseum, and everybody moved out of the way. I sat down. I sat there for 10 or 15 minutes. I felt fine. I was like nothing ever happened. And I said, well, guys, I'm going to go back down there. And I paid to see this group. I'm going back down to see Ozzy Osbourne. And so they said, you're crazy if you think we're going. And I said, well, suit yourself. Well, in a few minutes, they came tagging along again. And so I was down there and felt fine. Nothing further, didn't feel hot. Nothing further happened to me that night. So I went home. It was late. I got in the bed. And the next morning when I got up, it was on a Saturday morning, my mom met me at my bedroom door, and she said, son, what happened to you last night? And I said, well, what are you talking about, Mom? You knew I went to a concert last night. And she said, oh, I know you went to a concert. What happened at the concert? I said, it was good. It was 2 or 3 bands. It was great. She said, no, what happened to you at that concert? I said, Mom, why do you ask me that? She said, well, I had not been asleep very long when the Lord woke me up. My dad was working out of town. She was home alone. And she said, the Lord woke me up and said, you'd better pray for Tom. And she said, son, I got out of the bed and I started praying for you. And she said, in all your life, I'd never prayed for you like that. She said, Tom, I felt like I was trying to pray you out of hell. And it was just like somebody else slapped me through the face. It was like, what? And I wanted to tell her the whole thing, but my heart was still so hard. And I just said, well, Mom, I thank you that you care for me that much. And so I kind of blew it off. You would think that I would have fallen on my knees at the concert that night and asked God to forgive me, but I didn't. It wasn't until some months later, I was out in the woods. I would go out in the woods and get high by myself, and I would sit there and I would think about God. And I'd think about remembering when I was a child, what it was like. And just this hopeless feeling of he won't take me back. Well, it was a little while later, a few weeks maybe later, a friend of mine and I were at work one night. They called in a bomb threat. We knew there was no bomb in the building. The checks had gone around. We knew all it was about was we had the opportunity to leave if we wanted to. And I told my boss, look, I don't want to get blown up. And he said, there's no bomb. And I was like, oh, you never know. Bye. We left. My friend and I that I carpooled with started a party up on top of the mountain, and it came a terrible electric storm, and lightning struck a tree about 150 feet away, blew the top out of the tree, and we were sitting there stoned. And I said, wow, man, you talk about a light show. And we were laughing, and all of a sudden my laughter turned into sobriety. And I said, Junior, that probably should have been you and I. He said, what are you talking about? We should have been the ones hit by lightning. He said, why would you say that? I said, well, we're sitting here at 4 o'clock in the morning, stoned out of our minds and smoking dope in God's face. He's watching us. And Junior said, "Oh man, please, do we have to talk about this?" And I said, "Well, we probably should." And he said, "Man, I can't." He said, "I used to be a Christian." And he said, "But I got discouraged. My girlfriend broke up with me. My friends were calling me preacher." And he said, "I just came to the place that I gave up." And he said, "I went back. I'm worse than I ever was." And he said, "I just believe that God doesn't love me anymore." And I said, "Junior, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard anybody say. That's ridiculous." I said, "Junior, I know God loves you." And those words had no sooner left across my lips till I heard the voice of the Lord like thunder in my chest. I hadn't heard his voice since I was a child. And he said, "Tom, I love you too. Come home to me." And it was like somebody poured a bucket of hot water over my head when I'd just come out of the cold. I was so overwhelmed with the love and the presence of God, I couldn't breathe. I felt his forgiveness and his desire for me to come back to him. And I couldn't talk. It seemed like for 5 minutes. And Junior was just staring at me. I couldn't say anything. I was trying not to cry. And I said, when I got to where I could say something, I said, "Junior, I've got to go, man. I don't know how to tell you what just happened to me, but I can tell you one thing. I'll never be the same as long as I live." I said, "I'll talk to you Monday." He said, "That's cool." And I got in my car. When I sat down in my car, I said, "Jesus." When I said that, it felt like he sat down beside me. And I began to weep, and I wept for 15 miles. I couldn't hardly see the road for the rain and for crying. When I got back to where I lived, it felt like that wicked old Tom Anglin was dead and somebody new had taken his place. And that's really what happened. And that was 45 and a half years ago. And I've never been the same since. God called me as a little boy to preach. And I'm in the Gulf Coast of Florida, pastoring a church, a wonderful church. Friend, I can tell you this. No matter what you think, how unworthy you feel and how unforgivable you may feel, no matter what you've done, the Lord is rich in mercy to all that call on him. And if you'll do that, right where you're at, if you'll say, "Jesus, have mercy on me. Be my Lord, be my Savior. Take my hand. I want to follow you." He'll be the best friend you ever had, and he'll do miracles in your life. I've preached this gospel in other nations and a number of places in this nation. The reason it's called the gospel is because it is the best news. It's good news of the best kind. Just bow your head and say, "Jesus, receive me. Be Lord of my life." He will. And on Judgment Day, you'll have no regrets. God bless you. Thank you for watching. I pray if you don't know him, you come to know him today. God bless.